Nami sideboarding guide for mill connoisseurs. I mean, where else would you want to be for some Nami tips and tricks? Today, I want to go over a select couple of hands and provide some informative and I guess some direction to new Nami players and even old Nami players that might still have some confusion about some basic mulliganing tips. Now, I won't be going in depth in terms of matchups specifically. I want to provide a basis, and then maybe in future videos I could go over specific matchups or just kind of farther down the line or just other gameplay tips in general. If you want to see more videos like this, you got to leave a like on the video and show some love to this one, and let me know in the comment section down below what type of tips for Nami do you want to see in the future. Specific matchups, late game play, anything in between. I need to hear your thoughts down below. But in this Nami guide, we're going to go over again basic mulliganing. We're going to look at 5 different hands. I want to talk about the big overarching ideas as to why they're keeps, why they're mulligans. Do you keep on the draw? Do you keep on the play? And then also in the beginning, go over some basis for the One Piece TCG, what you're looking for when you're mulliganing, and that way you can use that and apply that to the hands that we're going to look at. So let's hop right into it with the basics. First and foremost, sideboarding in the One Piece TCG. So going over some general tips first. We have a 50 card deck plus 1 leader. We have 5 cards in hand, 5 life, which means there's 40 cards left in deck. So again, these are the numbers that you need to think about. These, you may know this subconsciously, but you have to keep these numbers because Nami is a numbers deck. You are generally going to be going through, ideally if you win, your whole deck. And then sometimes, in a lot of cases, you're going to be going through all 5 of your life cards. So information is key in terms of what you're putting away and what might be in your life. 1 free mulligan is the basics of this game, unlike other games like Magic the Gathering, where you can mulligan almost infinitely, almost I should say, but you're going down on cards each time. You get a free one, so you get to look at 5 again, and then you set your life cards once you keep your first hand or once you draw from your deck as well. So just keeping that in mind. Once you have those 5 cards in your hand, so especially if you're keeping your first hand, those 5 cards have no chance whatsoever. Those copies of those cards have no chance whatsoever of going back into your life. So that's another thing to keep in mind. If you only have 2 copies of a card and both of them in your hand and they have a good trigger, guess what? Those aren't in your life. So that's another thing to consider there. So that's sideboarding basics there. But what about for Nami? What are you looking for when you're generally sideboarding? That's going to be really going second when possible. There are some situations against aggressive matchups where I could see the argument for going first, where you essentially just develop your board, or you have an opportunity to develop your board quicker before your opponent does anything. So especially against like Bello Betty matchups, there is a world where you could go first, play out your buggies, and that way when they start swinging in with their 2k power creatures, 3k power creatures, your buggy could swing back at them because it's a decent attacker. So again, that's a possibility too. But generally against the meta matchups like Sakazuki right now in OP05 and kind of NL Katakuri, you're going second. Now what you're looking for is Kaya and Buggy. Those are the 2 cards that you're generally looking for in that order in your hand. First of all, Kaya, most hands with Kaya are generally keepable. We're going to actually go over an example where it may not be keepable, but Kaya, generally, you have that in your hand. You're able to filter out some of your bad cards. And then also Buggy is a decent second option, especially if you're going first. Buggy's a really good option just to play out on 1 Dawn, just to mill 1 card out and get the train going, put some cards at the bottom of your deck and have that knowledge for the late game. You also want to maximize your triggers. So your draw 2 triggers need to be in your life. Okay, so that's like Sanji's Pilaf, Impel Down All-Stars, and Desert Spada. So Desert Spada has a draw 2 discard 1, but it's still draw 2. Impel Down and Sanji's Pilaf just straight up draw 2 cards on their trigger, where Sanji's Pilaf is play the main effect, Impel Down just draws you 2 cards. These are effects that you need in your life, and generally you want to prioritize putting them away in your life. Desert Spada, again, so in this order, Desert Spada you want to kind of minimize, just because the fact that it's a draw 2, but it's also a counter, so you don't mind it in your hand. But Pilaf and Impel Down, if you have too many of those in your hand, you generally want to be mulliganing that hand, because also Impel Down is a dead card early in the game. Sanji's Pilaf you generally don't even want to see early in the game, just because it's such a high Dawn investment to get anything out of it, and your opponent can just get aggressive and in your face with that. Deathwink is a late game card with a good trigger as well, so this is another way of maximizing your triggers, where Deathwink you don't want to see early in the game unless you have a niche hand that's like kind of just getting rid of a bunch of cards in your hand, such as with Apices or Gum Gum Gavels, and then you can enable a Deathwing. But generally this is a card you want to see late game to draw into cards. It also has a really decent trigger of bouncing 7-cost cards. So not only can you bounce your own Zeffs and Kayas, but you can also bounce your opponent's stuff. So this is generally a card that you just want to put away as a trigger. And then dropping your late game card. So again, Deathwink is another one, Love Mellow. Those are the 2 cards that you generally want to be dropping later on, because Love Mellow is a great way to draw cards, and you usually can't enable that early unless you get rid of a bunch of cards in your hand, really just not in a great optimal way. You just have to like counter out with characters to empty your hand. So those 2 cards, if there's a bunch of them in your hand, really just get rid of it. And then finally, have a plan. What do you want to do against that matchup? Do you want to counter out early against aggro? Do you want to be proactive with Kaya or Buggy, right? Like, these are things that you have to think about. Like, do you have a bunch of Spada? Do you have a bunch of Usopp's rubber bands against like a Zoro matchup, against a Betty matchup? Okay. Or do you have a relatively dead hand and you're playing up against a deck that you know you're going to go a while with, like yellow? Then okay, let's look for Kayas, let's look for Buggies, cards that are going to go through your deck and help you sculpt the hands that you want to get to the win. And then finally, I left the take a hit as a niche piece, because there are matchups like yellow where against a card like Gidatsu that destroys a card or trashes a card based on the amount of life you have, you actually may just want to take a hit early, and that way you can keep actually a relatively bad hand and rely on the card that you draw to be powerful for you so that your Zeff can live. Right? That's really the big reason you're taking that hit. You're then at 4 life, that Gidatsu can't trash your Zeff, and they just have to have like a Thunderbolt to get rid of it as well. So that's a niche situation where you can keep a bad hand against yellow, but I don't want to go specifically too much in a matchup dependent stuff. Finally, let's go into hand number 1. Let's go into the hands themselves. So this hand is Sanji's Peel Off, Impel Down All-Stars, Deathwink, Desert Spada, Gum Gabble. Okay, so the points in this hand, too many good life triggers. Sanji's Peel Off, Impel Down, Desert Spada. Honestly, even Deathwink is a good life trigger, as we were mentioning. All of these are really good life triggers that you generally just want to be seeing in your life, or at least Deathwink in the late game. No Kaya or Buggy to sculpt this hand or mill cards out. Buggy honestly wouldn't even save this hand either. No Kaya at all. Just isn't that great either. And then this costs too much to get going. Deathwing costs 3 Dawn. Sanji's Peel Off costs 3 Dawn. Impel Down is a dead card. Gum Gavel makes you lose a card from your hand, which, you know, you can lose the Impel Down, but what if the Impel Down and the Gum Gavel were just like 2 rubber bands? Then you could just play them separately. So again, this is a mulligan on the play, on the draw. Not a great hand in general. Hand number 2, this is slightly better, but we still have too many good life triggers. Again, the Spada, Peel Off, Impel Down. Spada's not bad, but again, Peel Off costs way too much. Impel Down is a dead card that you can't even get rid of. However, there's also no Kaya and Buggy. I did say it was slightly better because you can now cast Love Beam and Zeff, but again, you're losing too many valuable cards early. So remember how I was saying Love Beam and Deathwink are late game cards? Well, Love Beam, in order to enable this hand, you have to likely lose the Zeff or a Spada in a swing that's not great for you, just to get down to like 4 cards in hand, cast your Love Beam so that when you cast it, it sees 3 cards in your hand. Like, you have to like counter out with good cards. So Zeff, obviously you can counter out with it. If you need to save a life, you save a life. But if this is your first hand, you're mulliganing this all the time. So generally speaking, on the play, on the draw, this is just going to be a mulligan because of those factors. Let's go to hand number 3, where this one is a bit more interesting. All right, so there's no Kaya, but there is Buggy, and there's Nojiko. So there is some interaction early. You don't counter out, but if your opponent's playing 5-cost cards, 4-cost cards, heck, even 3-cost cards, Nojiko is able to bounce them, especially if you're on the play. Buggy can come down and draw you some cards. So as I mentioned, Nojiko interacts early, and then the Buggies can help you find Deathwing to enable this hand. So let's think about some of the sequencing. Let's say you're on the play, you play Buggy, grab like an Impel Down. Then next turn, you grab a Buggy and grab a Deathwing. Then what you can do is you can Spada Gum Gavel, and you put the Impel Down away that you drew with the first Buggy. And then all of a sudden your hand's really empty. Next turn, you're at 5 Dawn. You could play like Nojiko and hold up Deathwing for those 2, or, you know, use some of the 2 mystery cards that you would have drawn through the next 2 draw steps. So this hand actually isn't that bad. Mulligan this, I think, on the play, but on the draw, I don't mind this, just because there aren't any like crazy good life triggers in here. Obviously Spada's like a draw 2, but it's fine here, and you're able to proactively just go through 2 cards in your deck. You're gonna draw a card as well when you're back with 3 Dawn. It's not that bad. I think on the draw you can do better, but also I can see an argument for keeping this on the draw, just because you're gonna get an extra card on that as well. Again, generally speaking, this is a mulligan. but it's actually a relatively powerful card, which is why I wanted to keep here. Let me know in the comment section down below. Would you keep this card? We'll keep this hand in general, or would you keep it only on the draw or only on the play? Love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Generally speaking, a mulligan, you could keep it on the draw. Now, hand number 4. This is where things start getting a lot better, but there's some caveats. So, too many resource dependent cards. So I wrote dependent. Okay, so no spell checking on my part, lazy content creator life, but too many resource dependent cards. And what I mean by that is Zeff costs too much Dawn, and usually you want to be bouncing something on board, so that's relying on your opponent to have something, or you having like a Kaya Apis, which is fine. You have one. Gum Gum Gavel discards a card from your hand. All these cards in your hand are generally pretty valuable. Apis requires 2 other cards that you don't want in your hand to disappear, and Kaya's card disadvantage, so you're going to be going down on cards playing this card. So generally speaking, look, there's not enough counters either. Gum Gum Gavel, it just doesn't count because there aren't other options. You're going to have to lose your Zeff and your Apises as 2k counters. And then finally using valuable cards too early for counters, which is what I was talking about. So there's not enough counters in terms of Usopp's rubber bands, Spadas, but you're using then Apises, Zeffs, because you're probably going to be playing Kaya as your first card here to counter out, which isn't that great. And you're only sculpting your hand. You're not actually going up on cards. You have to rely on drawing Deathwing. You're probably going to have to take a life or 2 just to recover from this hand. So generally speaking, on the draw, I would keep this because you have 1 extra card to then discard to the Apis, sculpt with the Kaya. But on the play, I would 100% mulligan this. You don't have enough resources. This is a trap of a hand. Even with the Kaya, honestly, this hand is a trap. Because you're going down on cards, and generally in the metagame right now in OPO5 and going into 6, and obviously maybe for future metagames if this is relevant, you just want more cards if possible. On the draw, it's fine because you're going to have 6 cards. On the play, too weak. Let's go on to hand number 5 finally. This hand is honestly one of the better hands out there. I like just talking about Kaya's here. Straight up. So Kaya, Apis is a 2k counter. Kaya's here. You have good cheap counters as in Spada and Usopp's rubber band, and then you can recur 1 or 2 of them with the Mr. 1, right? So you can recur the Spada, you can recur the rubber band. You're probably recurring the rubber band here, and you can sculpt a little with the Kaya depending on the situation. You're probably just going to be playing out the Kaya early, then you can hold up a counter. If you have a counter that you mill over with the Kaya, you can get that back with Mr. 1. Lot of good options here. And then finally Apis to dig. So especially on the draw, you're going to get that extra card that you can put away with the Apis to find a future Pilaf, find another Kaya, or just find an Arabesque Brickfist. A lot of good options here. Generally speaking, this hand is a keep all around. On the draw, it's even better. Having more cards to combo with the Kaya to put away and sculpt with resources is great. And then on the draw, on the play as well, it's perfectly fine. You play the Kaya out on 1. I could even see an argument for playing Apis out on 1. Generally, I wouldn't, but you're probably playing Kaya out. And then you're just going to be able to get the ball rolling from there, especially against an aggressive matchup. You have the Mr. 1 to swing back at other characters because it has the 1k power already. So again, all in all, pretty solid hand. This is a keep all in all through and through. That's pretty much it. That's the basic guide to mulliganing that I have. I hope I provided some insight into that, going over 5 example hands, bad to good, and then generally providing you with the basis with what you're looking for when you're mulliganing with Nami. The decisions you make in the beginning of the game really sculpt how you win in the late game, especially with cards like Buggy that let you rearrange the bottom of your deck and push good cards back up to the top as you play more and more Buggies. Really, decisions like this matter now because you're going to be looking through your whole deck. So the cards that you have left in your deck from the beginning of the game, again, they're going to dictate how you win in the end game. Let me know if you want to see more videos like this. Let me know what you want to see from those future videos. What type of depth you want to see? Do you want it to be simpler, more in depth? I'd love to hear your comments and thoughts down below. Leave a like on the video if you like the video, and of course subscribe for more Nami and just mill content in general.